Ava Lewis stood at the dock, her heart fluttering with anticipation as she gazed up at the towering luxury cruise ship. This was meant to be a peaceful escape, a chance to unwind and reconnect with herself after years of hard work. Dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, Ava carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from knowing her worth, even if others might not see it. As she made her way up the gangplank, she noticed the quick glances and murmurs from both the crew and passengers. The subtle looks, the fleeting expressions of surprise or disapproval, hinted at the judgments forming in their minds. She handed her ticket to the crew member at the entrance, who barely glanced at her before directing her to her cabin. The greeting lacked the warmth and friendliness she had observed with other passengers. Ava felt a pang of disappointment, but she brushed it aside, reminding herself that she was here to enjoy the trip. She took a deep breath, savoring the fresh ocean air and the promise of relaxation that lay ahead. The gentle sway of the ship beneath her feet as it pulled away from the dock felt like the beginning of an adventure, one she hoped would be filled with more than just beautiful scenery. As Ava explored the ship, the grandeur of the vessel was undeniable. Luxurious lounges, sparkling pools, and high-end restaurants promised a journey of comfort and indulgence. But the more she moved through the ship, the more she noticed the subtle slights. Crew members who avoided eye contact, passengers who moved away when she sat near them. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to make her feel like she didn't belong. Ava had faced prejudice before, and while it was nothing new, it still stung. She decided to focus on enjoying the amenities the ship had to offer, refusing to let the behavior of others mar her experience. As she settled into her cabin later that evening, Ava reflected on the day's events. The luxurious surroundings couldn't completely mask the discomfort she felt from the way she had been treated, but she was determined not to let it overshadow her time on the cruise. She reminded herself of the purpose of this trip, to relax, recharge, and enjoy a well-deserved break. Ava knew she had the strength to rise above the slights and make the most of her journey, even if it meant doing so with a quiet resilience that had defined much of her life. From the moment Ava stepped on board, she exuded a quiet confidence that was hard to ignore. She moved with the grace of someone who was comfortable in her own skin, who had faced the world's judgments before, and had come out stronger on the other side. Her dark skin glowed in the sunlight, and her short, curly hair framed a face that bore the marks of wisdom and experience. Ava wasn't the type to draw attention to herself, but there was something undeniably compelling about her presence. Despite the cold reception from some of the crew and passengers, Ava maintained her composure. She was well aware of the assumptions people often made about her, based solely on her appearance. But she had long ago learned not to let those assumptions define her. Instead, she carried herself with dignity and grace, refusing to let others' narrow perceptions affect her sense of self-worth. This cruise was supposed to be a time for relaxation and enjoyment, and Ava was determined to focus on that, rather than on the unspoken biases of those around her. As she navigated the ship's various decks and amenities, Ava's confidence never wavered. She greeted the staff with polite smiles, even when they responded with indifference. She made small talk with fellow passengers, some of whom were more welcoming than others. Throughout it all, Ava kept her head held high, knowing that her worth wasn't determined by the way others treated her. She was here to enjoy herself, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Ava's quiet confidence was rooted in a lifetime of overcoming challenges. She had faced discrimination and prejudice in many forms, and each time she had emerged stronger and more resilient. This cruise, she reminded herself, was just another experience, another opportunity to rise above the judgments of others. As she stood at the railing looking out over the endless expanse of ocean, Ava felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was exactly where she needed to be, and no one's opinions could change that. As Ava walked through the ship's opulent hallways and grand salons, she couldn't help but notice the glances that followed her. Some were quick and fleeting, a mere flicker of the eyes before the onlookers turned away, while others lingered a bit longer, filled with curiosity, surprise, or subtle disapproval. Ava had grown accustomed to these kinds of looks, but that didn't make them any less uncomfortable. It was a silent reminder that, in the eyes of many, She didn't fit the mold of the typical luxury cruise passenger. And now, in the dining room where she had been assigned a table for two near the back, the glances turned into stares. Ava could feel the eyes of other diners on her as she took her seat, their whispers barely audible over the soft clinking of silverware and the murmur of conversation. She kept her gaze steady, refusing to meet their eyes, and focused on the menu in front of her. It was easier to pretend she didn't notice, easier to keep her composure in the face of their unspoken judgments. The staff, too, seemed to be affected by the same assumptions. When Ava asked for a glass of wine, the waiter hesitated for a moment, as if questioning whether she belonged there at all. His response was polite but cool, a stark contrast to the warm, attentive service she observed at other tables. Ava's heart sank a little, but she remained outwardly calm. She had faced this kind of treatment before, and she knew that reacting would only make the situation worse. Instead, she focused on enjoying her meal, reminding herself that she had every right to be there. Despite the discomfort, Ava refused to let the stares and whispers ruin her experience. She reminded herself that the opinions of others didn't define her worth. She was here to relax, to enjoy the luxury of the cruise and to take in the beauty of the ocean. As the evening wore on, Ava allowed herself to sink into the experience, letting the soft music and the gentle sway of the ship soothe her nerves. She might not fit their expectations, but she wasn't here to meet them anyway. 4. The chilly reception. The chilly reception Ava received from the crew became more apparent with each passing day. While other passengers were greeted with warm smiles and enthusiastic offers of assistance, Ava often found herself on the receiving end of indifferent glances and half-hearted service. It was as if her presence was an inconvenience, something that the staff had to tolerate rather than welcome. Ava noticed the difference immediately, but she chose to rise above it, focusing on the positive aspects of her journey. In the mornings, Ava would take her breakfast on the sun-drenched deck, where she could enjoy the fresh ocean breeze and the calming sound of the waves. The waitstaff, however, were often slow to serve her, attending first to other passengers who had arrived after her. Ava would smile politely and thank them when they finally came, masking her frustration with a grace that had been honed over years of dealing with such slights. She refused to let their behavior dictate her enjoyment of the moment. During the ship's daily activities, Ava encountered the same indifferent treatment. Whether she was attending a cooking class, participating in a dance workshop, or simply lounging by the pool, the staff's aloofness was palpable. Other passengers received friendly banter and personalized attention, while Ava was often overlooked or treated with a cool formality. It was clear that the crew had made assumptions about her, and those assumptions dictated the level of service she received. Yet Ava remained undeterred, determined to make the most of her time on board. Evenings were no different. At dinner, Ava would sit quietly at her table, observing the lively interactions around her. The waitstaff, who were quick to refill glasses and engage in light conversation with other diners, seemed to avoid her table as much as possible. When they did approach, it was with a rushed demeanor, as if they couldn't wait to move on to the next guest. Ava accepted this treatment with her usual poise, but the weight of it began to take its toll. She couldn't help but wonder if things would ever change, or if she would have to endure this silent prejudice for the remainder of the cruise. Underscore, 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 underscore. Esos son los primeros cuatro subtítulos, desenvolvidos con cuatro parágrafos cada. Posso continuar con los próximos subtítulos, se desear. Continue más diminuo un poco el tamaño de cada parágrafo. 5. Navigating the ship. Ava continued to explore the ship, determined to enjoy the cruise despite the chilly reception. The vessel was stunning, with opulent lounges, vibrant entertainment venues, and serene spa areas. As she wandered through the various decks, she admired the luxurious surroundings and tried to focus on the beauty around her. Yet she couldn't completely shake off the subtle tension she felt in every interaction. The quick glances, the brief, forced smiles. It was clear she was being judged, and it weighed on her more than she cared to admit. The pool area was one of Ava's favorite spots. The sparkling water and the open sky above offered a sense of freedom and escape. But even here, she noticed the same patterns. Guests would choose loungers far from hers, and the pool attendants seemed to be more attentive to others, barely acknowledging her presence. Ava tried to let it go, reminding herself that she was here for peace and relaxation. Still, the undercurrent of exclusion was hard to ignore. Despite these slights, Ava made an effort to engage in the ship's activities. She attended a wine tasting, joined a yoga class, and even tried her hand at painting in an art workshop. In each setting, she was met with polite but distant interactions. The instructors and other participants were courteous but kept a certain distance, as if unsure of how to connect with her. Ava remained cordial, participating fully, but always felt a sense of being on the outside looking in. By the end of each day, Ava would return to her cabin, both physically and emotionally drained. She would reflect on her experiences, acknowledging the hurt, but also reminding herself of her resilience. Ava was determined not to let these moments ruin her trip. She knew that the opinions of others didn't define her, and she resolved to continue making the most of her time on board. 6. The subtle slights. As the days passed, the subtle slights became more noticeable to Ava. She couldn't help but see the differences in how she was treated compared to other passengers. The crew's body language, the tone of their voices, and the way they prioritize others over her. It was all too familiar. She had experienced this type of behavior before, but it still stung. Ava found herself dreading certain interactions, knowing they would likely end in frustration. At the ship's boutique, Ava decided to buy a few souvenirs. As she browsed, she noticed the sales attendant hovering near another customer, offering suggestions and assistance. When Ava approached the counter to ask a question, the attendant's demeanor shifted to one of disinterest. The response was curt, and the attendant quickly returned to helping the other guest, leaving Ava to feel dismissed. She made her purchase with a forced smile, hiding her disappointment. Even the simple act of ordering a drink at the bar became a reminder of her outsider status. While others were served promptly, Ava often had to wait, her requests seemingly forgotten. When the bartender finally did acknowledge her, it was with a perfunctory politeness that lacked any warmth. Ava felt the sting of being overlooked, but she kept her composure, knowing it wasn't worth causing a scene. Despite these daily frustrations, Ava refused to let them dominate her experience. She reminded herself that she was stronger than the prejudices of others, and that she deserved to enjoy her trip just as much as anyone else. Each evening, as she watched the sunset from the deck, she would take a deep breath and let the ocean's calm wash over her, finding solace in the natural beauty around her. 7. Keeping composure. Throughout all the slights and cold receptions, Ava kept her composure. She had always been someone who handled adversity with grace, and this situation was no different. Each day, she would wake up, put on a smile, and face whatever the day brought with quiet strength. Ava knew that reacting to the negativity would only give it more power, and she was determined not to let that happen. She carried herself with dignity, even when she felt invisible or unwelcome. In the dining room, Ava continued to experience the same dismissive treatment. The waitstaff would often pass by her table without stopping, attending to others with enthusiasm while barely acknowledging her. But Ava remained patient, speaking up when necessary but never allowing herself to be drawn into confrontation. She knew that her presence alone was a statement of her worth, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. Ava also found solace in small, quiet moments on the ship. Whether it was sitting alone on her balcony with a good book or taking a solitary walk along the deck under the stars, these moments allowed her to center herself and find peace. They were a reminder that, despite the challenges, she was still in control of her own experience. The ocean's vastness and the ship's gentle rocking provided a sense of calm that counterbalanced the tension she felt elsewhere. As the cruise went on, Ava's resolve only grew stronger. She knew that she was facing bias and prejudice, but she refused to let it overshadow the purpose of her trip. Ava was here to relax, to enjoy herself, and to find a sense of tranquility. She wouldn't let the judgments of others define her or dictate her experience. Instead, she chose to focus on the positives, reminding herself of the strength she had cultivated over a lifetime of facing and overcoming adversity. 8. Exploring the amenities. Determined to make the most of her cruise, Ava spent her days exploring all the amenities the ship had to offer. The spa, with its tranquil ambiance and soothing treatments, became one of her favorite retreats. The staff there, though professional, were no more friendly than elsewhere on the ship, but Ava found peace in the quiet solitude of the experience. She let the tensions of the day melt away as she enjoyed the massages and facials, focusing on the relaxation they provided. Ava also attended several of the ship's entertainment events. From live music performances to cooking demonstrations, she wanted to immerse herself in the cruise's offerings. However, she couldn't escape the feeling of being an outsider. Other passengers seemed to form cliques, bonding over shared experiences and backgrounds that Ava didn't quite fit into. She often found herself sitting alone, politely clapping along with the crowd, but feeling somewhat disconnected from the camaraderie around her. One evening, Ava decided to join a dance class. The instructor, a lively and energetic woman, encouraged everyone to partner up, but Ava noticed that the other participants seemed hesitant to pair with her. Eventually, she found a partner, but the interaction felt stiff and awkward. Despite the less than welcoming atmosphere, Ava threw herself into the dance, allowing the music to lift her spirits. She was determined to find joy in the experience, even if she had to create it herself. Through it all, Ava maintained her poise. She knew she couldn't control how others treated her, but she could control how she responded. She chose to focus on the beauty of the ship, the calming presence of the ocean, and the moments of serenity she found in solitude. Each day was a new opportunity to find peace and happiness, and Ava was determined to seize those moments, no matter how small they might be. Underscore 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 underscore. Esses são os próximos 4 subtítulos desenvolvidos com parágrafos um pouco menores. Posso continuar com os próximos, se desejar. Continue. 9. Overheard conversations. As Ava continued to explore the ship and participate in its activities, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversations that further highlighted the biases aboard. One afternoon, while lounging by the pool with a book, she heard two women nearby discussing another passenger. Their tones were hushed but condescending as they speculated about how someone like her could afford such a luxurious cruise. Ava felt a familiar pang of frustration, recognizing the same judgmental attitudes that had been directed at her. The comments were indirect, but clearly meant to suggest that certain people didn't belong in these spaces of privilege. Ava had long learned to let such words roll off her back, but they still stung. She knew that her presence on the ship was making some people uncomfortable, simply because it challenged their preconceived notions of who should and shouldn't be there. It was disheartening, but it also reinforced her resolve to enjoy the trip on her own terms. Later that day, Ava overheard another conversation while waiting in line for a cooking demonstration. A group of passengers ahead of her were talking about their travel experiences, boasting about the exotic locations they had visited. When one of them mentioned seeing someone out of place on the ship, the others laughed knowingly. Ava's heart sank as she realized they were likely referring to her or someone else they perceived as different. She kept her face neutral, determined not to let their words affect her outwardly. Despite the hurtful comments, Ava reminded herself that these attitudes were a reflection of others' narrow-mindedness, not of her own worth. She took a deep breath, focusing on the positive aspects of her trip. The beauty of the ocean, the opportunity to relax, and the small joys she found each day were enough to keep her spirits lifted. Ava knew that she was stronger than the prejudices around her, and she resolved to continue finding moments of peace and happiness, no matter what others might say. The weight of judgment that Ava felt aboard the ship became more pronounced as the days went by. It wasn't just the cold stares or the whispered conversations. It was the subtle ways in which she was consistently treated as less than the other passengers. Whether it was the delay in service at the restaurants or the indifferent responses from the crew, Ava felt the cumulative effect of these slights pressing down on her. It was a silent burden, one that she carried with grace, but it was heavy nonetheless. Ava found herself growing more introspective, reflecting on the countless times she had experienced similar treatment in her life. Each instance had left its mark, shaping her resilience and her understanding of the world. On the surface, she appeared calm and composed, but inside she was grappling with the familiar pain of being judged unfairly. She knew that these experiences were part of a larger pattern, one that many others face daily, and this awareness only deepened her resolve to rise above it. The most challenging moments came during group activities, where the exclusion was more overt. In a wine tasting event, Ava noticed that the sommelier spent more time engaging with other guests, offering them detailed explanations and personal recommendations, while giving her only the bare minimum of attention. At a trivia night, the teams formed quickly, and Ava was left standing alone until a group reluctantly accepted her into their fold. The discomfort was palpable, and Ava found herself questioning whether it was worth participating at all. Yet despite the weight of these judgments, Ava refused to let them define her experience. She reminded herself that she was on this cruise to find peace and relaxation, and she wasn't about to let the ignorance of others take that away from her. Each evening, as she stood on her balcony and watched the sun set over the ocean, she felt a renewed sense of calm. The vastness of the sea and the beauty of the horizon reminded her that there was so much more to life than the narrow views of a few individuals. Ava held on to this perspective, using it to lighten the burden she carried. One afternoon, Ava decided to spend some time by the pool, hoping to enjoy the sun and the soothing sounds of the ocean. She found a quiet spot, away from the more crowded areas, and settled into a comfortable lounge chair. As she relaxed, she allowed herself to drift into her thoughts, reflecting on her experiences so far. The warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze helped to ease the tension that had been building up over the past few days. This was the escape she had been seeking, a moment of peace amid the turbulence. As she lay there, her thoughts returned to the many instances of bias she had encountered throughout her life. From her early years in school, where she had to prove herself over and over again, to her professional life, where her competence was often questioned simply because of her appearance. The cruise, which was supposed to be a break from the pressures of everyday life, had turned into yet another reminder of the prejudices that still existed. Ava sighed, wondering if she would ever truly be free from these burdens. Despite the heavy thoughts, Ava found comfort in the knowledge that she had always overcome these challenges with grace and dignity. She had learned to find strength in her own self-worth, refusing to let others' opinions define her. The poolside offered a moment of respite, a chance to recharge and regain her composure. Ava closed her eyes, focusing on the sound of the waves and the distant laughter of other passengers. She reminded herself that she was here for herself, to relax and find joy, and that was exactly what she intended to do. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the pool area, Ava felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had faced many battles in her life, and this cruise was just another test of her resilience. But Ava knew that she was strong enough to rise above it all. She stood up, gathering her belongings, and walked back to her cabin with a renewed sense of purpose. No matter what happened next, she would continue to hold her head high, knowing that she deserved every bit of happiness she sought. As the cruise continued, Ava became more observant of the interactions around her. She noticed how the staff treated other passengers, particularly those who, like her, didn't quite fit the typical mold of wealth and privilege. There was an older woman traveling alone who was often ignored by the waitstaff, and a young couple with modest clothing who seemed to receive the same distant service Ava had encountered. It was clear that these subtle biases were not just directed at her, but at anyone who didn't meet the unspoken standards of the ship's elite clientele. Ava's heart went out to these passengers, knowing all too well the sting of being treated as if you were invisible. She watched as the older woman tried to engage with the crew, only to be met with polite but dismissive responses. The young couple, who were clearly excited to be on the cruise, often found themselves sitting alone, with other passengers avoiding eye contact or making an effort to distance themselves. It was disheartening to see, and it made Ava even more determined to maintain her own dignity in the face of such treatment. At one point, Ava struck up a conversation with the older woman, who introduced herself as Margaret. They bonded over their shared experiences on the ship, finding solace in each other's company. Margaret confided in Ava that she had saved for years to afford this trip, hoping for an adventure of a lifetime, but had instead encountered indifference and exclusion. Ava listened with empathy, sharing her own thoughts and offering words of encouragement. Together they found strength in their shared resilience, reminding each other that their worth was not determined by how others treated them. Through these interactions, Ava realized that the problem wasn't just with how she was being treated, but with the larger culture of exclusion that seemed to permeate the ship. It was a culture that valued appearances and status over kindness and inclusivity. This realization deepened Ava's resolve to rise above it, not just for herself, but for others like Margaret and the young couple who deserved better. She knew that the true measure of a person was not in how they were treated, but in how they responded to that treatment, and Ava was determined to respond with grace and strength. As the cruise progressed, Ava became more attuned to the biases subtly displayed by both passengers and crew. The pattern was undeniable. Those who didn't fit the traditional image of wealth and status were consistently overlooked or treated with less respect. Ava saw it not just in her own interactions, but also in how others were treated. It was clear that preconceived notions about who belonged in such a luxurious setting were deeply ingrained. At one dinner, Ava observed a couple seated nearby, both dressed modestly. The waiter barely acknowledged them, offering only minimal service compared to the more affluent-looking guests. Ava felt a pang of recognition. She understood the silent message being conveyed. Despite this, she remained composed, aware that reacting with anger would do little to change the situation. The biases were not just in the service, but in the attitudes of other passengers as well. Ava noticed how certain guests would avoid sitting near her at events, choosing instead to gather with those who looked like them. It was a quiet exclusion, one that Ava had encountered many times before. She responded by focusing on the positives of her trip, determined not to let others' narrow-mindedness diminish her experience. One evening, Ava decided to dine alone, hoping for a quiet meal to reflect on her journey. The restaurant was bustling, filled with laughter and conversation, but as she entered, she noticed the subtle shift in energy. The hostess guided her to a small table in a corner, away from the lively groups and the stunning ocean views. It was clear that she was being placed out of sight, an attempt to maintain a certain image in the more visible areas. As Ava sat down, she couldn't help but feel the weight of isolation. The waitstaff was slow to attend to her, and when they did, their interactions were curt and mechanical. Ava observed the contrast in how they treated other guests, serving them with warmth and attentiveness. It was a stark reminder of the biases she had been facing throughout the cruise. Despite the cold reception, Ava chose to savor her meal, focusing on the flavors and the peacefulness of dining alone. She knew that she was stronger than the discomfort of being sidelined. By the end of the evening, Ava had found a sense of calm within herself, reminding herself that she was in control of her experience, no matter how others chose to treat her. As Ava was returning to her cabin one evening, she was approached by a staff member who handed her a formal invitation. Surprised, she opened it to find that she had been invited to a private cocktail event hosted by the ship's captain. The invitation felt out of place considering how she had been treated so far, but Ava accepted it with curiosity, wondering what had prompted this change. When she arrived at the event, Ava was met with a different atmosphere. The gathering was intimate, with only a select group of passengers present. The captain greeted her warmly, acknowledging her with a respect that had been missing in earlier interactions. Ava couldn't help but feel that this was a calculated gesture, perhaps an attempt to rectify the poor treatment she had experienced. Throughout the evening, Ava engaged in polite conversation with the other guests, many of whom now seemed eager to get to know her. The shift in their attitudes was palpable, but Ava remained cautious, aware that their interest might not be genuine. Nevertheless, she carried herself with grace, using the opportunity to enjoy the evening and connect with others on her own terms. The ship's grand gala was the most anticipated event of the cruise, a night of elegance and celebration. Ava dressed in a stunning evening gown, deciding to attend despite her reservations about how she would be received. As she entered the ballroom, she was struck by the opulence around her. The sparkling chandeliers, the exquisite decor, and the sea of guests dressed in their finest attire. Yet even in such a glamorous setting, Ava couldn't escape the subtle glances and whispered judgments. Ava found a seat toward the back of the room, not wanting to draw too much attention to herself. As the evening progressed, she observed the interactions around her, guests mingling, laughing, and sharing stories of their travels. Ava felt like an outsider, her presence noted but not entirely welcomed. It was a reminder of the silent barriers that existed even in spaces of luxury and supposed inclusivity. Despite this, Ava enjoyed the performances and speeches, appreciating the artistry and effort that had gone into the evening. She knew that she belonged there, just as much as anyone else, and she refused to let the coldness of others diminish her experience. As the night drew to a close, Ava felt a sense of accomplishment for attending and enjoying the event on her own terms, regardless of the underlying tensions. During the gala, the ship's captain took to the stage to announce a special charity auction designed to raise funds for underprivileged communities. The announcement caught Ava's attention immediately, as she had been a silent supporter of this cause for years, making substantial donations under an alias. The captain spoke passionately about the impact of these funds, mentioning a mysterious benefactor who had contributed greatly to the cause. Ava listened intently, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. She had always preferred to keep her contributions private, believing that the focus should be on the impact rather than on the donor. Yet the captain's words seemed to hint that her anonymity might soon be revealed. Ava's heart raced as she considered the possibility, unsure of how she felt about stepping into the spotlight in this way. As the captain continued, the room filled with anticipation, with guests speculating about who this generous benefactor could be. Ava remained calm on the outside, but inside she was bracing herself for what might come next. She knew that if her identity was revealed, it would change the dynamics on the ship, forcing everyone to confront their assumptions and prejudices. Ava had been involved in philanthropy for many years, quietly supporting causes she believed in without seeking recognition. She had always been motivated by a desire to make a difference, rather than by a need for acknowledgement. Her contributions to the ship's charity initiatives had been significant, funding educational programs and healthcare services for communities in need. Ava took great pride in knowing that her efforts were helping to improve the lives of others. Throughout the cruise, Ava had kept her philanthropy to herself, not feeling the need to share this part of her life with the other passengers. She preferred to observe from a distance, knowing that her contributions were making an impact. But as the charity auction announcement was made, Ava realized that her anonymity might not last much longer. The thought of being thrust into the spotlight was daunting, but she knew that it was important for the cause to be highlighted. As the evening continued, Ava reflected on her journey as a philanthropist. She had always believed in giving back, in using her resources to uplift those who were less fortunate. This belief had guided her actions for years, shaping her into the person she was today. Ava knew that if her identity was revealed, it would be an opportunity to inspire others to give as well, and she prepared herself for whatever might come next. As the auction approached its climax, the captain returned to the stage, his demeanor slightly more serious than before. He spoke of the importance of the charity work being supported and how much it had impacted lives around the world. Then, with a pause that seemed to hold the room in suspense, he mentioned that the time had come to reveal the identity of the ship's most generous benefactor, who had remained anonymous for years. The room buzzed with anticipation, and Ava felt a wave of nervousness. She had never sought recognition for her donations, and now she found herself at the center of attention. The captain then gestured towards Ava's table, inviting her to stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are honored to have with us tonight the remarkable woman behind these contributions, Mrs. Ava Lewis." As Ava slowly rose from her seat, the room erupted in applause, though it was clear that many were shocked by the revelation. Ava maintained her composure, walking to the stage with a quiet grace that belied the storm of emotions inside her. The captain welcomed her warmly, and for the first time during the cruise, Ava felt truly seen, not for her appearance, but for the impact she had made on the world. With Ava now revealed as the benefactor, the charity auction began with a renewed sense of excitement. The items up for bid were luxurious and exclusive: rare wines, private vacation packages, and unique art pieces. The auctioneer, sensing the heightened energy in the room, encouraged generous bids, knowing that the presence of the benefactor herself added weight to the event. The guests, now aware of Ava's significant contributions, participated with enthusiasm, eager to be part of something meaningful. Ava watched from the stage, her earlier apprehensions slowly fading. She was proud of what was being achieved, knowing that the funds raised would go to causes she deeply cared about. Despite the earlier tensions and prejudices she had faced, this moment was about something bigger than herself. It was about making a difference, and she was grateful to be part of it. The auction was a success, with bids surpassing expectations. As each item was sold, the guests cheered, creating a sense of unity that hadn't been present before. Ava's presence and the revelation of her philanthropy had shifted the atmosphere on the ship, bringing people together in a common cause. By the end of the night, the funds raised were more than enough to support the initiative she had championed, and Ava felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her contributions would continue to make a difference. As the final gavel fell and the last item was sold, the captain took the microphone once more. He expressed his deep gratitude to everyone who had participated in the auction, but especially to Ava, whose generosity had made the entire event possible. The captain invited Ava to say a few words, and as she stepped up to the microphone, the room fell silent, all eyes on her. Ava felt the weight of the moment as she looked out at the sea of faces, many of whom had judged her just days before. With a calm and steady voice, she thanked everyone for their support and participation. She spoke briefly about the causes she had supported, emphasizing the importance of giving back and helping those in need. Her words were heartfelt and sincere, resonating deeply with those in the room. When she finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. Ava could see the genuine admiration in the eyes of many, and the realization that their earlier judgments had been so wrong. As she left the stage, several guests approached her to express their appreciation, their attitudes transformed by the evening's events. Ava accepted their compliments graciously, knowing that this was a turning point, not just for the cruise, but for the way people perceived her. As the evening progressed and the guests mingled after the auction, Ava noticed the shock that lingered on many faces. The passengers who had previously dismissed or ignored her were now grappling with the revelation of who she truly was. Conversations that once revolved around superficial topics now turned to discussions about generosity, philanthropy, and the impact of one's actions. Ava observed these shifts with quiet satisfaction, aware that her presence had sparked a much-needed reflection among the guests. Some of the passengers who had previously kept their distance now approached Ava, their demeanor markedly different. They offered apologies for their earlier behavior, expressing regret for having judged her without knowing her story. Ava listened to each apology with grace, accepting them with the understanding that this experience was as much a lesson for them as it was a revelation for her. Ava's transformation from an outsider to a respected figure was palpable. Where there had once been coldness and indifference, there was now warmth and respect. The guests who had once whispered behind her back were now eager to engage with her, to learn more about her work and the causes she supported. Ava took this opportunity to share her passion for philanthropy, hoping to inspire others to give back in their own ways. The evening had turned into an unexpected but meaningful connection between Ava and those who had previously judged her. After the initial shock of the revelation had passed, the captain invited Ava to join him on stage for a more formal acknowledgement of her contributions. The room, still buzzing with the surprise of the evening, quieted as Ava made her way to the front. Standing under the bright lights, Ava felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had never sought recognition for her philanthropy, but she understood the importance of this moment, not just for her, but for everyone in the room. The captain spoke warmly of Ava's generosity, highlighting the impact her donations had made on countless lives. He emphasized the importance of looking beyond appearances, acknowledging that many had misjudged her based on their own biases. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in as the guests reflected on their own behavior over the past few days. When Ava was handed the microphone, she spoke with a quiet confidence that captivated the room. She thanked the captain and the crew for their efforts in organizing the auction and expressed her gratitude to the guests for their participation. Ava spoke about the causes she supported, emphasizing the importance of empathy, kindness, and the responsibility each person had to make the world a better place. Her words resonated deeply, leaving the audience in thoughtful silence as she concluded her speech. As Ava stood before the room full of passengers, she could feel the intensity of the moment. She had spent much of the cruise feeling isolated and judged, but now she had the opportunity to share her truth. With a calm but powerful voice, Ava began her speech by expressing her appreciation for the support the auction had received. She spoke about the importance of the causes being funded and the difference the guest contributions would make in the lives of those less fortunate. Ava then shifted the focus to the broader theme of the evening, the assumptions people make based on appearances. She addressed the subtle and not so subtle biases she had encountered during the cruise, not in anger but as a means to open the eyes of those who might not realize the impact of their actions. Her words were not accusatory, but rather a gentle reminder of the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of how they looked or where they came from. Her speech was met with a profound silence, the kind that signals deep reflection. Ava could see the change in the faces of the guests, their earlier judgments replaced with a newfound understanding. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause, not just for her generosity, but for the grace with which she had handled the entire situation. Ava felt a sense of closure, knowing that she had not only made a difference through her donations, but also by challenging the biases that had been so prevalent on the ship. In the days following Ava's speech, the atmosphere on the ship underwent a noticeable change. The crew, who had previously been distant and cold, now treated her with a newfound respect. They greeted her warmly, ensured her needs were met promptly, and went out of their way to make her feel comfortable. The passengers, too, had shifted their attitudes. Those who had once kept their distance now sought her out, eager to engage in conversation and learn more about her work and her life. Ava observed these changes with a mix of relief and curiosity. It was clear that the revelation of her identity and the impact of her speech had left a lasting impression. The same people who had judged her now looked at her with admiration and even a hint of guilt for their previous behavior. Ava welcomed these interactions, but she remained cautious, aware that change in attitudes might not be permanent. Despite this, Ava made the most of the remaining days on the cruise. She enjoyed the newfound camaraderie, participating in more group activities and engaging in meaningful conversations with the other guests. The tension that had once surrounded her seemed to dissipate, replaced by a sense of community and mutual respect. Ava appreciated the shift, knowing that her presence had helped to challenge and change the preconceived notions of those on board. During the last days of the cruise, Ava had a candid conversation with the ship's captain and senior crew members. The captain, having realized the depth of the crew's misjudgments, invited Ava to share her experiences and feedback. Ava, ever gracious, spoke openly about the subtle biases and slights she had endured since boarding the ship. She emphasized that while she appreciated the shift in treatment, it was important for the crew to understand the impact of their actions on all passengers, not just those who turned out to be influential. The captain listened attentively, acknowledging the need for better training and awareness among the staff. He apologized sincerely, expressing his commitment to ensuring that all passengers, regardless of their appearance or background, were treated with equal respect and hospitality. Ava appreciated his response, knowing that this conversation was a step towards change. Following this meeting, the captain announced new inclusivity training for the crew, aiming to create a more welcoming environment for future voyages. Ava felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that her experiences had prompted a positive change. She hoped that the crew would carry these lessons forward, making the ship a more inclusive space for everyone who sailed on it. In the days after her speech, Ava was approached by several passengers who had initially judged her. They came to her with genuine apologies, expressing regret for their assumptions and for the way they had treated her. Ava listened to each of them with an open heart, understanding that this was a moment of growth for them. She accepted their apologies with grace, using the opportunity to reinforce the importance of empathy and understanding in all interactions. One woman who had been particularly cold to Ava earlier in the trip admitted that she had been influenced by stereotypes and societal expectations. She thanked Ava for opening her eyes to the biases she held, promising to be more aware in the future. Another passenger, a man who had avoided Ava during social events, expressed his embarrassment and shame for having misjudged her. Ava's calm and kind response left a lasting impact on him, as he vowed to change his ways. These apologies, though late, marked a significant shift in the dynamics on the ship. Ava could see that her actions and words had made a real difference, prompting introspection and change among the passengers. While she hadn't sought out this attention, Ava was grateful for the opportunity to inspire others to look beyond the surface and to treat everyone with the respect they deserved. With the ice broken, Ava found herself engaging in deeper, more meaningful conversations with other passengers. The barriers that had once separated her from the rest of the guests seemed to dissolve, replaced by a genuine curiosity and desire to connect. Ava spoke about her life, her work, and her passion for philanthropy, sharing stories that resonated with those who listened. These conversations were a far cry from the superficial exchanges she had encountered at the start of the cruise. Ava also took the time to listen to the stories of others. She learned about their lives, their challenges, and the reasons they had come on the cruise. These exchanges were enriching for both Ava and the other guests, as they found common ground and shared experiences that transcended their differences. It was clear that the initial judgments had been replaced by a mutual respect and understanding. As the cruise neared its end, Ava reflected on the connections she had made. What had begun as a journey marked by isolation and prejudice had transformed into an experience of learning, growth, and meaningful engagement. Ava knew that these conversations would leave a lasting impact, not just on the guests she had spoken with, but on herself as well. The cruise had challenged her in ways she hadn't expected, but it had also given her the opportunity to connect with others on a deeper level. As the ship approached its final destination, the newfound respect Ava had earned was evident in every interaction. The passengers who had once judged her now sought her out, eager to spend time with her and learn from her. The crew, too, treated her with a warmth and attentiveness that had been missing at the start of the journey. Ava felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had brought about this change in attitude. In the final days of the cruise, Ava was invited to join several social gatherings, where she was welcomed with open arms. The conversations were lively and engaging, with guests eager to share their own stories and to hear more about Ava's experiences. There was a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect that had not existed before, and Ava cherished these moments of connection. As she prepared to disembark, Ava reflected on the transformation that had taken place. She knew that the respect she had earned was not just a result of her revealed identity, but also of the grace and dignity with which she had handled the situation. Ava had turned what could have been a painful experience into an opportunity for growth and understanding, both for herself and for those around her. On the final morning of the cruise, Ava packed her bags and prepared to leave the ship. As she made her way to the disembarkation area, she was greeted warmly by the crew and passengers alike. The journey that had begun with judgment and exclusion had ended with respect and admiration. Ava felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had not only enjoyed her trip, but had also made a meaningful impact on those she encountered. As Ava stepped off the ship and onto the dock, she took a moment to reflect on her experience. The cruise had tested her patience and resilience, but it had also reaffirmed her belief in the power of kindness and understanding. Ava knew that she would carry the lessons she had learned with her, using them to continue her work in philanthropy and to inspire others to look beyond appearances. Walking away from the ship, Ava felt a sense of peace. She had faced prejudice and overcome it with grace, leaving behind a legacy of change and introspection among the passengers and crew. As she moved forward, Ava knew that she had not only enjoyed a well-deserved break, but had also played a part in creating a more inclusive and empathetic world.